The importance of deadlifts as an adult. How has your thinking changed on this? I like your history on this one, so maybe even take it back to in school when you were doing powerlifting before it might have been in vogue.
Yeah, long before it was in vogue. One of my best friends in high school, who was also involved in boxing and martial arts, we would go to the Scarborough campus of the University of Toronto every day and lift weights. And it's still one of the fondest memories I have of what a gym could be like. It would certainly it was certainly not the sunny, warm Golds in Venice, but it had some of those features, which was old school, lots of iron, nothing fancy. Of course, unlike a nice gym, this was like 2 stories below ground, so there were no windows, poorly ventilated. So in the summer, it was staggeringly hot. In the winter, it was so cold, you felt like you were getting frostbitten by touching the iron. And aside from me and my friend, there were no kids there. We were 14, 15, 16 years old. And it was this group of men who, to this day, I think back and can't believe how strong they were. And most of them competed in powerlifting. And so that sort of got us interested in powerlifting. And that's how we sort of started putzing around with it. And as most people know who are listening, or I guess people who might know who are listening, powerlifting is different from Olympic lifting. Powerlifting is 3 lifts: the deadlift, the squat, and the bench press. And so, yeah, make a long story short, grew up doing a lot of deadlifting, a lot of squatting, a lot of bench pressing. Was always very horrible at bench press, much better at squatting and deadlifting. Fast forward to, I don't know, a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I had an injury where I kind of tore or partially tore one of my obliques. I don't even remember how I did it. I remember it was very stupid, whatever I did. And everything
Tearing a phone book?
That would be great.
Possible.
But everything went kind of sideways after that. And I really was never able to fully deadlift again without some discomfort. And so, again, this is now take it back to maybe 2016. I sort of decided, you know what, maybe the deadlift has reached its point of futility and maybe I've extracted all I'm going to out of that. And there's no denying what a wonderful movement it is in terms of being a total hip hinge compound movement. But I was like, look, I could probably get most of the benefits of a deadlift doing things that place me under less load. And also, again, in the spirit of thinking about longevity, I thought, why does one need to subject themselves to twice their body weight or more in an axial load? So I sort of got away from it. And then I think all that kind of changed when I started DNS, Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization, which I started about 18 months ago. And we're going to have a podcast on this topic because it's just, there's so much I want to talk about here. And so actually, I think today we got an email about how we're trying to make some time for this podcast. So we'll definitely, if you're listening to this and you don't know what DNS is, Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization, by all means, you should go read about it. But we're going to have at least one solid podcast on this. But it was through that process that I realized actually the deadlift for me was going to be beneficial, not because of the metabolic benefits. I was not going to be doing Tabata deadlifts like I used to, or even by trying to set records for how much I could lift or anything like that, but rather because it becomes a beautiful audit for everything working perfectly. So I deadlifted this morning. So today's a Monday. I deadlifted on Saturday. I deadlifted a few days before that. Like I deadlift at least twice a week, often 3 times a week, both straight bar and trap bar. And Bob, I don't go that heavy. I don't know the last time, maybe I've had 400 pounds on one of those on the trap bar in the past year, but I usually sort of stop at about 350 to 375. On the straight bar, I'm even lighter, maybe 185. I do a lot of slow eccentrics. I film every single rep of every single set. And I study it and I send it to Beth Lewis, who is my coach. And we do so much around making this deadlift perfect. And I'd rather take a light weight and deadlift it perfectly several times a week. And I'm not doing like killing crusher sets. Like, I mean, today was 4 sets of 10, 5 sets of 10 maybe. And at no point was I like past my limit. So again, I can push myself harder doing other things. But what I could get out of doing that deadlift perfectly is, do I have just the right amount of thoracic extension? Do I have just the right curvature in the lumbar spine? Am I activating my glutes? Am I activating my hamstrings? Am I pulling back instead of pulling up? Am I wedging correctly? Like all of this little stuff translates biomechanically to the activities of daily living that matter to me, like getting up off the floor, picking up one of my kids, lifting a piece of luggage or something like that. And so if I can do the deadlift and it feels right, then I know I'm ready to do everything correctly. And when I'm deadlifting and I feel like, hey, this isn't correct, this doesn't feel right. Well, first of all, now I've really learned what that feeling is. And secondly, I've now learned the steps that I can go back and reconstruct what needs to be done. And so one of the things I definitely want to do is actually put together kind of a video on deadlift and deadlift preparation, because I think that there are probably 10 exercises that I do as a way to get ready to deadlift. And they don't take long. Like this, my deadlift checklist is like 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not so onerous. It's almost like ketosis, the way we were talking about it in the past, right? Which is, it's not even clear if it's the ketones themselves that can sometimes be the benefit versus the metabolic conditions that allow you to make them, right? In other words, I'm not even sure how much of the benefit is the actual deadlift versus all of the things you have to do the deadlift correctly. And one of the most exciting things, just on this, the last thing I say on this, is it never occurred to me up until a year and a half ago that you could actually deadlift in a way that puts your spine under traction. That's very counterintuitive. You would think that anytime you're lifting under an axial load, your spine is under compression. But it turns out when you learn the right positioning and you understand how to create intra-abdominal pressure and you know how to elongate your spine, you can actually deadlift and create traction in the spine actively. And that's why deadlifting is the most important thing I do before I get on an airplane. Because when you're on an airplane and you're sitting there for 5 or 6 hours, what you really want to do is not let your spine be compressed. And the deadlift primes me to then go and sort of maintain that activated form of traction.
Yeah, it's a significant investment, but I would say it's worth it that you'll bring your hex bar to the gate before your flight and pump yourself up and bang out a few sets.
I mean, I don't know what it is about the TSA guys. They get so wigged out when you have your hex bar there at the gate.
Putting that overhead? Yeah.
Yeah. If you're TSA pre, they don't mind as much. But if you're not TSA pre, they just lose it.
Sticklers. They're sticklers.